Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. During the last week, I think I've seen more rainbows than I have in the previous year. It has been unsettled. We've had heavy and often thundery showers pushing through, longer outbreaks of rain at times, also strong winds, a very autumnal mix. Now, will that continue to be the case as we head through the next 2 weeks? Well, I think there are some changes on the way, but let's have a look. This is the picture at 18 GMT on Tuesday the 16th. There's a nasty area of low pressure centred just to the west of the UK, and as I run the sequence, what we see is outbreaks of rain associated with it move across all areas. Rain then becomes slow moving over central Britain, warmer air to its south, colder air to its north. But then through the weekend, another change begins taking place. That colder air, or at least cooler air to the north, starts pushing southwards, and there are some heavy outbreaks of rain in England and Wales associated with this area of low pressure, which you can see. That gradually moves away eastwards, and the cooler air then sinks down across all areas. And the week finishes with high pressure centred to the west in the Atlantic, a chilly northerly flow moving down over the UK. Some showers there, mostly in the north and the east, but a good deal of dry weather. So a lot's taking place. Here's the jet stream and upper air temperature sequence. The mottled shaded area shows the track of a jet, and it's covering the UK. That's important because areas of low pressure are going to be close to it. Also, it marks a boundary between the very warm air, which is still present to our south, and the colder air to our north. The orange shading there, indicating the warmer air, actually moves up into southern and central parts of Britain for a time at least. Later in the week, though, that cooler air sweeps southwards, as I've already mentioned. And I just thought it was worth bringing up this sequence using data generated from the UKV model. It also shows 850 HPA forecast temperatures through the first 5 days of the week. So these are the values at about 1500 metres above sea level. The orange shading indicates warm air aloft. The greens and blues, which you'll see later, show the cold air. So as I run the sequence, what we see is that orange moves up across much of England and Wales. It stays there for a time, and then later on, as we go through the weekend, that colder air begins to push southwards. You can see it there. This sequence is just cycling through, it's repeating. So there is going to be some very warm air aloft, but temperatures down at the surface will be dependent upon the extent of cloud cover and sunshine. So let's take a look at the day-by-day charts. This is the picture for Wednesday, the 17th. Temperatures not that far from the average at this point, but the key thing is there are outbreaks of rain moving eastwards across the UK, some of them heavy at least for a time. By Thursday, it's now turning warmer, particularly in central and eastern England. Temperatures 22, 23 degrees, cooler in Northern Ireland and Scotland, and the rain there mostly affecting northern and central parts of England, Wales maybe, perhaps the southwest Northern Ireland too. So it's the boundary between the cooler conditions and the warmer ones. By Friday, there are some indications that the cooler conditions are starting to slowly edge southwards, but still in East Anglia and the southeastern corner, 22, 23, 24 degrees is possible, and it's mostly dry there with the rain affecting the southwest, Wales and central parts of England, a few showers in Scotland. By Saturday, temperatures are taking a tumble in the north, as central areas too, maybe 10 to 15 degrees, but down in the south we're still seeing 21, 22 perhaps, close to London, because that is where the warmer air is still residing. It's gradually been pushed away. You can see the outbreaks of rain there, which are more or less marking the boundary between the warm and cool air masses, and the trend is for those to push southwards and then move away through the weekend, but the details are uncertain. The charts here for Sunday and Monday using the GFS data show the heavy rain on Sunday, the drier conditions on Monday. They also indicate very low temperatures actually for the time of the year, 8 degrees there in central England on Sunday, 11 on Monday, but take them with a pinch of salt. I think the reality is values will be several degrees higher than what is shown here. GFS can have a tendency to go down the extreme route at times. Nonetheless, I think temperatures will be taking quite a sharp dip through Sunday and Monday in the south as that cooler air advances. It's also going to be quite windy at times. I've just brought up a couple of charts here to illustrate. One on the left is Wednesday, one on the right is Thursday. There could be windy periods later on in the week as well, so keep an eye on that. It doesn't look as though we're going to be seeing disruptive wind speeds in most of the UK, but there is a chance of coastal gales. Here's the Morgreps G 850 HPA temperature graph for London. So each line on this graph represents a forecast from one of the runs in the model, and they are of course very tightly clustered to begin with. That remains the same as this warmer air feeds in from the south. It's a very warm air mass, perhaps reaching 15 to 20 degrees. But then what we see later on from about the 19th or the 20th is the lines start diverging. So in other words, they are showing different solutions, much to do with how quickly that cooler air from the north will be reaching this part of the UK, or even if it will at all. I think it probably will, because most runs eventually see values falling down to about 0 degrees or even slightly below it. So maybe Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we have the cooler air reaching parts of the south. And another way of looking at the same data from Morgreps 3 is to plot the individual runs at a given time. This is called a postage stamp plot. It shows the forecasts, 850 HPA temperature forecasts at 15 GMT on Sunday. You can see the blue shading there indicating the cold air covering much of Scotland on a lot of the individual postage stamps, a lot of the individual runs. Moving forwards 24 hours, and that cool or cold air has lost its mojo, but it has advanced southwards. It's losing its intensity. Nonetheless, values in the south are still taking quite a tumble. We're seeing maybe 15 degrees at the 850 HPA level on Saturday and Sunday, falling to close to 0 degrees on Monday. So that cooler air is going to be making it down to the south according to most computer model runs. Rainfall. The 5-day aggregates from the ECM and GFS models show the greatest totals in Wales, northwestern England, northern England in general. The values are higher on the ECM model, up to about 140, 150 millimetres there in northwestern Wales, but the distribution is quite similar on both charts. Moving forwards to the 10-day accumulations, and they've continued increasing, particularly across Northern Ireland, England and Wales. Even in the southeast and East Anglia, there's about 20 to 40 millimetres being forecast by the ECM model. The value is a little bit lower there with the GFS, between 10 and 20 in the far southeastern corner. But once more, quite good consistency here in terms of the actual distribution of rain. I think there may well be some problems with the rain in parts of central northern England, Wales, maybe the southwest too. It is something to keep an eye on, because there are some high forecast totals being suggested, at least according to some of the models. So in more general terms, how do the deterministic models compare with each other as we head towards the end of the first week? This is the GFS on Tuesday the 23rd. High pressure centred to the west, that colder or cooler air moving down across all areas. The Canadian model though is different. There is high pressure, but it's centred just to the north, and we've got more of an east or southeasterly flow even moving across the south of Britain, and the values aloft are quite a bit higher. The German icon, high pressure centre there to the northwest, or just to the west really I suppose, and the cooler air is moving down across all areas. This one could be quite realistic, I suspect. The ECM model, similar, the high pressure centred here, maybe just to the west, northwest of Scotland and Ireland, and cooler air covering all parts of the UK. The artificial intelligence version of the model, similar, high pressure here, it shows up nice and clearly, that cooler air as well moving down. And finally, the UK Met Office Global. Interestingly, this looks a little bit more like the Canadian model, with more of an east or a southeasterly flow there in the south and settled conditions in the north close to that area of high pressure. So there are some significant differences there between the deterministic models by the time we reach the end of the first week. What can be said is they all would point towards somewhat more settled weather as a minimum. It depends exactly how close the high pressure is going to be to the UK, but certainly high pressure does look like it will be having a lot more influence at this point. So drier periods become increasingly likely. Temperatures, well, there could be some chilly nights around, and the days may well be chilly, particularly in central and northern areas. A little bit of uncertainty about how things will be shaping up in the south, with one or two of the runs bringing in at least relatively warm air even at this point. So more settled, probably cooler. Temperatures in the south maybe not very far from the average. Now, how do things shape up as we head through the second week? Well, of course, at this range, it's just about using the ensemble data to try and identify the general trends and probabilities. Here is the 16-day GEFS ensemble plot for London. Upper air temperatures across the top, the thick black line is the 30-year average. So initially, most runs are a little bit below it, but the mean, the thick purple line, is climbing and it becomes close to the average. So temperatures recovering after a probably rather chilly start, although as I've just mentioned with the deterministic models, it's not a given that it will be chilly in the south, but probably temperatures a little bit below the average to start off with. There is a risk of rain at times, looking at the number of rain spikes along the bottom, but there isn't a huge number of them, so I would expect there to be a reasonable amount of dry periods, so high pressure still having some influence. Here's the artificial intelligence European ensemble plot. Very similar actually to the GFS, so it just backs up the message, I think. 850 HPA temperatures below the average to begin with, but recovering as we go through the second week. 2 metre temperatures for London using the GEFS data, maximums through the days on the top half, minimums through the nights on the lower part of the chart. Lots of orange there through the days, 16 to 20, some yellow early on, 11 to 15. The nights, well, a good amount of green, light green showing up to begin with through the first 3 or 4 nights. Those runs going for between 6 and 10, so supporting the idea of it being cooler at least to begin with. The trend though is for temperatures through the nights to be picking up through the middle and second part of the week, with daytime values not changing a great deal, but just edging upwards, probably at least according to most runs. There's a little bit less yellow towards the end and a bit more of the 21 to 25 beginning to return as we head towards the end of the second week. So I don't think temperatures are going to be a big player through the second week, maybe a little bit chilly to start off with some cool nights, but then becoming close to the average. Up to Manchester, more or less the same along the top, and in terms of rain, well, there is that ongoing risk. It's probably increasing though through the second half of the week. So dry periods here are more likely early on. The 2 metre temperature data tables, something of an upwards trend there through the days and through the nights actually as well. The amount of light green there starts to reduce later, just supporting the same idea as for what I've been discussing on the London data, which is that it could be a little bit chilly to start the second week, but then temperatures are likely to be recovering towards the average. Glasgow, it's the same story, but perhaps the rainfall forecast is a little bit more clearly defined even on the Manchester graph, because there are not very many spikes through the first few days, but their number and size increases later, also supporting the idea that in the north the chance of rain increases through the second half of the second week. Dry periods are more likely to be found early on. The 2 metre temperature data tables for Glasgow, nothing particularly notable here. 11 to 15 through the days, the yellow dominating the daytime columns for nighttime lows. A chance of ground frost. So the nights are now becoming long, of course, and the chance of frost is rapidly starting to increase. 77% of the runs in the dark green category to begin with. Those are ones going for overnight lows of between 1 and 5. So when I'm talking about frost, often ground frost where temperatures don't have to dip below freezing point. The ones which do dip below freezing point are still in a very small minority. You can see there's just one there indicated by the blue. Rainfall for the second week. These are the ECM probability charts. They show the chance of 5mm or more of rainfall on the first 3 days. And the greatest chance is in England and Wales through the first 2 days. You can see the green shading there, some yellow shading indicating between 30 to maybe 50, 60%. By day 3, the chart on the right, it's becoming more typical. The highest risk of significant rain is in the northwest, pointing towards the Atlantic beginning to return. Through the next 3 days, that trend continues. The green shading there in western Scotland, northwestern England, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest would all suggest that the weather will be starting to come in from the west, but it's not looking especially wet, or the chance of large amounts of rain is not looking especially high, would be a better way of putting that. Between 30 and 50% maybe in the northwest. In central and eastern England on a given day it's closer to maybe 0 to 30%. So the Atlantic may be returning later on, at least that's what an increasing number of runs in the ensemble are pointing towards. With that said, the ensemble runs do tend to trend back towards the average at longer ranges, so it is too early to be confident about this type of thing happening. Here's the mean surface level pressure data table for York. The orangey reds here are making up a large amount, taking up a large amount of space in the columns for the first few days, although a decreasing amount. Now those are runs which are strongly high pressure dominated. As I've said, venom decreases, and towards the end, for the last few days, the amount of green starts to increase. Runs which are low pressure dominated, there's even a little bit of blue returning, strongly dominated by low pressure is what that indicates. So the trend is for pressure, at least in the York area, central parts of the UK, to be falling as we go through the second week, supporting the idea that in the north at least, the chance of rain will be increasing later in the period. The GEFS mean surface level pressure snapshot chart for Friday the 26th at this point indicates that high pressure will actually probably still be having quite a lot of influence, but maybe becoming centred further east, and the Atlantic starting to return in the north, especially the northwest of the UK. Fairly similar according to the European ensemble chart at the same time. High pressure there maybe centred over continental Europe, with the Atlantic starting to feed back in. So turning more changeable or unsettled in the northern half of the UK, especially the northwest. Once more fitting in quite well with those probability charts which I just brought up a little earlier. So to try and summarise all of that, Week 1, rain in all of the UK early on. It then becomes focused on central and southern areas. Windy at times. Temperatures increase in the south. There's that possibility of it turning warm or even very warm, but much depends on the amount of sunshine. Through the weekend and into the late stages of the first week, the chilly air in the north pushes southwards, so it will be turning cooler even in southern parts of Britain, probably. Week 2, early on, rain is more likely in the south, but in the north, the opposite is true. The chance of rain increases through the second half of the second week. After a chilly start, temperatures become quite close to the average. So, there we have it. Quite a mixed bag of weather, as I suggested at the start, for some changes on the way. The possibility, at least, of it being warm in the south for a time, before that cooler or even significantly cooler air from the north moves down across all parts of the UK. Things become a little bit uncertain, or very uncertain actually, through the second week, with the suggestion that towards the end of it, it's going to be a more typical pattern returning. Weather systems moving in from the Atlantic, bringing the wettest conditions into the north and particularly the northwest of the UK. Temperatures not that far from the average. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Then as ever, if you did, please consider hitting the like button below. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. That helps a lot. It also means that you won't miss any of my future updates. Don't forget as well to stay up to date with the day-to-day weather developments by checking out the weatheroutlook.com website. Thanks very much now. Bye.